There
There was
are
a meme. Yeah,
there are these amazing Korean, Taiwanese, French bakeries everywhere where there are a lot of Asian people.
there's a
And
lot of
I
Asian
want
people.
you all to be aware of some of you are not down with my people. Stop Asian hate, y'all. But go out and try, go out to one of these incredible bakeries. Got a cake that the French people can't make. So we're from the global east taking on the global west. But
Well, speaking of globes, I don't
petition,
know if I was talking to you when you were writing this piece, but I know we had spoke last year and you were working on your upcoming book, which is going to talk about trauma
yeah,
culture.
yeah, yeah,
And when we were texting back and forth, and you had mentioned something to me. I want to say it was around the time AOC, and you talk about this in the piece too. AOC had come out about January 6th, and how traumatizing it was, and
yeah,
came out and said that she was a victim of a sexual assault.
yeah, yeah,
And you had said, because I could tell you were writing because there's a million thoughts coming out at once,
yeah,
and you were like, "This started with Oprah." I was like, "What are you talking about?"
yeah, yeah.
So, what was the impetus for you to even want to write about this?
Well, there's one, thing that I wanted to figure out in academia, how trauma studies took over academia after the late 80s, early 90s. And I was in some of those classes on trauma with some of the professors at Yale that invented this field of study. And at the same time, like, I'm just wondering, like, why the left always fails to seize power or organize itself properly in the public sphere. And, friends of mine and I are always laughing about, or, really angry about the 60s counterculture and how they turned, a collective discontent into like the bitter ashes of disappointment and became like the me generation, and spent all their time in self cultivation after the 70s and 80s. And um, and I thought it was really important to understand how trauma plays a role in configuring like the subject of democracy
Mhm.
and the subject of politics. And it was, the beginning of like really violent cancel culture. That when Jason and I were talking about this, like really violent language about cancel culture, right? Um, on Twitter, somebody told me to go kill myself because I
Mm.
questioned pronouns. I mean, there was just kind of notion that offense
Mhm.
needed retribution, like mob justice, when you know um, BlackRock, which is a hedge fund,
Mhm.
is run by one guy named Larry Fink with $1.4 trillion in his control, larger than the combined GDP of Canada and the UK today. Right? So you have this incredible concentration of wealth and total abuse of public funds, public sphere, all of our lives. 3 out of 5 children in America have known hunger in their lives. Like, it's the statistics are incredible, but everyone is focused on their own hurt,
Mhm.
and how to adjudicate that hurt as a sign of political progress. It's like giving up on objective critique and focusing really intensely on subjective experience. This has been like a red thread through my work throughout all of the time that I've been thinking, because I'm always like, they're the objective conditions for revolt, right? We for revolution. Why do we fail to come together? And in the book on the professional managerial class, I offer one explanation where the liberal left after the 60s is completely taken over by the members of the professional managerial class, my class, and they believe that progress is going to be completely configured around what they want as self cultivation. And I mean, that's saying a lot, but I try to like explain it through funny case histories in virtual hoarders. But the trauma book gets to this next level where I try to think about how, in the Reagan era, really, there are all of these um, they think it's new discourses within academia about how to visualize and actualize injury, personal injury damage.
Mhm.
And at the same time, you have Oprah sort of taking over daytime television and taking it over by using the language, the cadences of the Black church to create this sort of charismatic space on Black television where women, and mostly white women, watch to find some reflection of their own experiences, right? And this, it becomes like she built her whole empire on this. But if you trace her career, like she's kind of um caught in this genre with a lot of like other trashy people, right? She's displaced Phil Donahue and
Mhm.
she's doing her thing. And there are her rivals are, just going for sensation. And in order, I think,
Mhm.
to distinguish herself from them, but also because she's so good at capturing the zeitgeist. In
Mhm.
the middle of the 80s, there's a lot of like more awareness about child abuse, about child sexual abuse and victimization. She goes on her television show and talks about being sexually abused as a child. And that is a huge game changer. I mean, people are becoming aware of this in the Catholic Church. People are, it's becoming more um, the anti-authoritarianism of the 60s has become really mediatized, and Oprah is able to distinguish herself and her show by confessing on television
It,
to millions and millions of
is
people.
it is this around the same time though that we have this kind of rise in people going to therapy, and when we're having in the 90s it really started blowing up, and then you get a little bit of a pushback from it in the 2000s where doctors are implanting thoughts in people's head of traumatic events, especially during the satanic panic. So there's all these kids that are told that they're being
Yes,
molested, and of course
yes.
there's that book that comes out in, I want to say, the 60s or 70s, where this woman starts talking about all these things that her dad did to her. Um,
Which one? There are many of those.
it's
Um,
the one that really keys the satanic panic, where she said her dad had like sewed a tail to her and horns and all.
okay. I don't.
Remembering something, and the guy that wrote it, she later married, who was her psychologist.
Yeah, so there were a lot of these shrinks who came out of the 60s, encounter groups and
Mhm,
things like that, exactly, Jason, who were practicing, thinking that they were healing, and this was
mhm,
like all part of this new getting in touch with their feelings. I mean, most of you are too young to remember this, but there was an idea that, the older generation were just repressed, and then
mhm,
we were all going to be better parents, better people. So Oprah gets on, and it's a huge game changer. The other thing that was happening in the media that I wanted to look at too was the sensationalization of multiple personality disorder. They
mm,
called
mhm,
dissociative identity disorder, and it exists in some corners of the internet, and there are communities, but much smaller and less powerful than that time. But a lot of what people said about multiple personality disorder was that it was caused by childhood abuse, right?
mhm,
And so we were all this is so interesting. So in like 1984, Reagan is president. He's
mhm,
not saying the word AIDS. There's so much
mhm,
generalized homophobia that no one can talk about AIDS publicly. But Oprah, when she talks about her childhood sexual abuse, she says she's coming out of the closet, and she wants to have
using that
other
language.
people
Yeah.
come out of the closet with her.
Mhm,
And she still doesn't talk. She doesn't talk about AIDS. Goes on in her show. But what she does feature in the late 80s are these spectacular cases of multiple personality disorder, and there are special clinics that treat these people. But there's one woman on her show, and it's all archived in the Oprah on her website, which is incredible. You can go back. She's not, just she's not disavowing any of this. There's one woman who allegedly had 95 personalities, Trudy
Mhm.
Chase, and she really makes a huge sensation. You guys are too young to remember Sybil. She had a
I remember Sybil because they
remember
played it
Sybil.
on the
Read
made-for-TV
me the
movie,
fuck out because
Sally Field.
yeah, and
Yeah.
my parents would drop me off at the library, and like I was totally unsupervised. So maybe I was like, I was just wandering around. And I found this book, and traumatized for life. Um, there and because there were certain resonances with the kinds of childhood that I was experiencing, like combination of neglect and abuse and stuff like that. So you had this idea that there was going to be this societal transformation. This definitely comes out of the 60s, right? Where we couldn't have change, social
Mhm,
change, unless we all changed ourselves first, because we needed to have like a radical reevaluation of childhood, of parenting, of all this stuff. And it was an elite segment, the media and academia, that really believed in this,
mhm,
because they were, and this is my argument. I'm going to try to make this with statistics in the book, but the 80s were actually the last gasp of an incredible sort of redistribution of goods from the top down. It ends in the 80s with Reagan, but people are pretty economically comfortable within this segment of the population. Oprah, of course, is making tons of money doing what she's doing, but it's like we can't worry about the economic issues because everyone is kind of okay, but every economically, but people are not okay psychically. And this becomes like part of the public culture of America. And I am a nerd, and I really like to look at historical evolutions and ideas. And the idea that we would produce social change through changing each one of us individually actually comes from um, this new age healer person, Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote this book called The Age of Aquarius. And her whole thesis was, and you guys are probably, and I totally like believed this when I was a young person too, right? That
mhm,
we were moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, and there was going to be this spontaneous change from like, suffering and authoritarianism to connection and new agey, new agey stuff. It was the new age. We were moving to a new age, and each of us had to participate in self transformation in
mhm,
order for there to be collective transformation. This
mhm.
is such an important part of the American liberal ideology.